Welcome back to Focus on Pre-K. This is the final module of the course, and in this section, we will preview Unit 5. Unit 5 is Shadows and Reflections. Notice how the enduring understandings, or big ideas, are similar to the big ideas in other units, particularly Unit 3, Wind and Water. Unit 5 is Shadows and Reflections. Notice how the enduring understandings, or big ideas, are similar to the big ideas in other units, particularly Unit 3, Wind and Water. This unit might be considered the most difficult to teach because conceptually, the phenomenon of shadows and reflections are the most abstract of all the curriculum content. However, let's refer back to Session 2 in Module 3 and the important elements of an inquiry environment that supports children as scientists. As always, connecting to children's prior experiences and knowledge provides a hearty scaffold and gives you, the teacher, an opportunity to assess how children have progressed. For example, in Unit 5, children will be constructing a woodland, the habitat for many of the animal characters in the read-alouds. Think about how you can leverage what they know or have done when they built rabbit habitats in Unit 3. Now let's preview the read-alouds and some of the related activities and lessons. The unit begins with Play With Me by the same author as Gilberto in the Wind. In this story, a little girl wants the forest animals to play with her, but they are too shy or cautious. Disappointed, she sits by a pond, and she discovers that if she is quiet and calm, the animals will approach her. Children can revisit the ideas that they encountered in earlier units, such as how to be a good friend in Unit 2 and caring for animals in Unit 3. In Raccoon on His Own, a curious baby raccoon sets off to explore his surroundings and ends up stranded downstream in a boat. Relate this to other animal families and babies, as in Rabbits and Raindrops and One Dark Night. In Library and Listening and Writing and Drawing, children will research woodland animals. They will learn how light affects their habitats and how animals have adapted as nocturnal animals. In Dramatization and Blocks, they will create their own woodlands, similar to what they might have done when they built caves in Unit 4. The abstract concept of reflections becomes more meaningful with concrete experiences, such as making kaleidoscopes. They will explore how light plays on color and the designs that are created by the reflection on mirrored surfaces. They will also experiment with how reflections differ on opaque, transparent, and translucent materials. First, by sorting and classifying them by attributes. They will be introduced to mylar, a new material that they will use in blocks to cast reflections. In Week 2, children will read Kitten's First Full Moon. A kitten has a misadventure, similar to the cat family in One Dark Night. Because the kitten doesn't understand what a reflection is, she mistakes the moon's reflection in the water for a bowl of milk. She gets stranded in a tree, much like the cat in Matthew and Tilly. In the art studio, children will create black, gray, and white illustrations inspired by Kitten's First Full Moon, and use the materials they sorted to create reflective collages. In Discovery, Children will cast reflections in water, similar to the ones that the characters encounter in the read-alouds. After experimenting with mylar and blocks, they will then use mirrors, a different reflective surface, to compare and contrast how objects appear in each. In weeks 3 and 4, children read Dreams by the familiar author Ezra Jack Keats and meet a new character, Roberto, who also rescues a cat like Matthew and Tilly. One night, his mouse puppet falls from his window and grows large enough to scare a dog who is chasing his friend's cat. In the puddle pail, Saul and Ernst are a pair of brothers who have a disagreement about reflections being real collections. In both of these stories, children will consider what happens when perspectives differ. These abstract and more complicated concepts will be more meaningful to children as they explore them through concrete experiences using interesting objects and materials. For example, they will create puppet shows with shadows and experiment how the position of the light source in relation to the object affects the size and the shape of an object's shadow. Just as light affects an animal's woodland habitat, children will explore how light affects people's neighborhood habitats and create a city skyline at night. Throughout the unit, children will use tools such as mirrors, flashlights, and even the sun to conduct experiments. They will search for shadows in the classroom and on the playground. This is a great opportunity for outdoor learning, as shadows will differ in size and shape during different times of the day. They will use their documentation of these experiments to test out their hypothesis, create art, and tell stories. They will use images of their own shadows in matching games, such as Guess Whose Shadow, as well as images to match letters and letter sounds. This is more complicated as children will need to determine an object that corresponds to the shadow and to the word. Similar to Saul and Ernst, children will create collections by classifying and sorting objects by attributes into groups and naming them. They can also create classroom museums to display their collections. In the art studio, they will create stained glass, which they can also use in blocks to create windows using the resources provided. In Swipple, the predictable text is Night Shift Daddy. The story revolves around a little girl's relationship with her father, like Peter and his. They will compare and contrast how the neighborhood looks and operates at night versus how they have seen neighborhoods so far during the day. The nonfiction text, Guess Whose Shadow, provides facts and explanations of the phenomenon of shadows and reflections. But as always, these become more meaningful and deeply understood when reinforced with concrete experiences in centers and small groups.